1 day, 17 hours and 4 minutes into the shutdown, and Republican leaders blame Democrat demands for funding the illegal immigrants for the stalemate. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and House Speaker Mike Johnson insist Democrats must choose Americans over taxpayer-funded benefits for illegal aliens and reopen the government now. Joining me is Washington Stand reporter Casey Harper. Casey, what are you hearing about how this shutdown is actually affecting everyday Americans?
Yeah, well, Tony, first of all, our troops and Border Patrol agents, they're required to work with pay being held until the government reopens. And about 750,000 federal workers, they've been told don't come into work at all. Now, this all has left many asking the question, how's this going to affect the economy and everyday Americans?
The U.S. government shutdown has hit the brakes on the flow of federal economic data at a moment of uncertainty. But if history is any guide, the shutdown itself is unlikely to have a lasting impact on the U.S. economy. Part of the reason for that is that most of the previous 20 shutdowns have been short, lasting about a week or less. They are a headache for the Federal Reserve, especially now as policymakers seek clarity on the jobs market and inflation. Those policymakers won't get the monthly jobs report and other data until the government reopens. They have to rely on private surveys, which are sometimes viewed as a poor proxy for the government data. The Fed cut interest rates last month for the first time since December because of growing concern about the job market. Financial markets see a near certainty of another rate cut at the central bank's next meeting this month. However, Shana Sissel, the Bonrian Capital Management founder and CEO, says this shutdown could impact that.
I do think the lack of economic data of some of the larger economic data points that the Fed pays attention to could delay the Fed from cutting further.
Meanwhile, even though hundreds of thousands of federal workers are on furlough and a range of important government services are suspended, shutdowns themselves don't typically move the needle long-term for the economy. It depends on what's happening around the shutdown. Stocks did take a hit during the last shutdown in 2018, but rebounded quickly, according to Robert Conzo, CEO and Managing Director of the Wealth Alliance.
Last one was during the Trump era, was 35 days from December of 18 to January of 19. The market dropped, and it started a week before the actual shutdown, so there was a lot of anticipation. Dropped around 15%, then quickly came back and rose past that. Typically, there's headline risk, markets drop, but then they typically come back.
So, Tony, the takeaway here is if Democrats, get their act together and come to the table, this won't be too big of a problem. But if they prolong this shutdown, it could disrupt air travel and food assistance for millions of Americans. So it's a big issue, but I do want to make clear that those who are receiving Social Security payments will still receive their checks, Tony.
All right, well, the shutdown we know will continue at least until tomorrow when the Senate next convenes to address the issue. I want to turn now very quickly to a sad story. Security was tight outside synagogues in New York City this Yom Kippur following a deadly attack at a synagogue in Manchester, England. Casey, what's the latest on the story out of England?
Yeah, that's right, Tony. Police have increased security outside of these New York City synagogues on this holiest day of Yom Kippur in the Jewish calendar. And as you pointed out, this heightened security follows a deadly attack in Manchester, England, where a man drove into this crowd outside of a synagogue, got out of the car, and started stabbing those in the crowd. This happened during their Yom Kippur services. Here's the British head of counterterrorism, Lawrence Taylor.
And based on what we know, counterterrorism policing has declared this as a terrorist incident. Our specialist teams are now leading the investigation into what happened at Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue and working closely with Greater Manchester Police. As we do this, those who have been killed and injured are at the forefront of our minds.
So the suspect was shot dead by police. 2 people were tragically killed, 4 others injured, and 2 more arrests have been made, Tony.
All right, Casey, that's one of the reasons we continue to track these attacks. It appears that we're talking about one of these almost every day, either a church or a synagogue, and in fact, it is almost every day. That's why we do our church hostility report to keep people updated, so we can also encourage and work with lawmakers to provide greater protections and raise awareness to this. All right, Casey, thanks so much for joining us.